In January 2015, the first State of the Bay Research Symposium was held at the Alaska Ferry Terminal on Bellingham Bay. The purpose of the all-day event was to enhance communication and coordination between various agencies, organizations, and citizens involved in the protection of Bellingham Bay. The symposium brought together researchers, managers, and interested citizens who are all connected to the future of the bay. The symposium featured 7 distinct topics, including Bellingham Bay Yesterday and Today, local key issues, challenges, and research needs, physical processes, chemistry and water quality, biological ecosystems, regional research perspectives, and moving forward with limited funding. We will present the State of the Bay Symposium in 7 parts. This is Part 1, Bellingham Bay, Yesterday and Today.
I've been asked to give a short overview of Bellingham Bay to try to put it in some kind of context for the presentations that are coming. I'd like to look at the boundaries. What is Bellingham Bay? Talk a little bit about jurisdictions in the Bay, a little bit about impacts, how we've changed the Bay, a little bit about current issues that we're dealing with, and then finally looking ahead to what might be some major issues into the future. So, Bellingham Bay, where is it? And what is it? Well, I kind of like the NOAA approach because they are the official namers of Bellingham Bay, and so you see up here the official NOAA chart for Bellingham Bay. And the first thing I'd like you to notice is that the name starts up in the north end. You can see, well, how do we make this thing work? There we go. The name starts up there and then goes all the way down to there. What does that mean? It means that Samish Bay is part of Bellingham Bay. So technically, Bellingham Bay is the total body of water that is influenced by the Nooksack in the north, a few streams from the east, and the Samish River in the south. Is that a good one, a good definition for our purpose? It sort of depends what you're interested in. If you're concerned about the risk of oil pollution from the fact that the southern part of Bellingham Bay here is used as a parking lot for oil tankers and for oil barges, then you want to look at Bellingham Bay in that totality. If you're interested in the import of organic material into the north part of Bellingham Bay, then you want to look at Bellingham Bay in its totality. But for our purposes, we're interested closer to home. I know when I've talked about this in the past, saying, where are the boundaries of Bellingham Bay? For the most part, people say, well, if we take the section from Post Point, maybe across to Eliza, but probably across to Portage Island, then that covers most of the Nooksack River estuary and most of the kinds of issues that we're concerned about. So when we talk about Bellingham Bay today, probably we're talking about that northern part, but if you would keep in mind that it includes the southern section as well. All right, what about jurisdiction? Who has control over it? Well, first there's the feds. They have control over everything, being the federal government, even though they don't have a heavy hand all of the time. But the federal government has given permission to other sovereign groups to have governance over parts of Bellingham Bay. Let's start first with the Lummi Nation. You can see the boundary of the Lummi Nation, and consequently their part of Bellingham Bay goes from the tip of Portage Island in the south, across the bay and along the tidelands, and then up to the mouth of the Nooksack River. That's the part in Bellingham Bay that is under the jurisdiction of Lummi Nation and under their control. There's another part here, the state comes next, DNR. DNR has control over all of the lands up until the high tide line of the state waters of Washington. And they have the right to lease out or otherwise protect land for various uses, to the city, to the county, or to other lease users. Here's an interesting one that I found that I still don't know the full impact of. Here is a DNR. Is it a lease? No, it's a reserve, I've been told, off of Portage Island that has been reserved for uses of the Lummi Nation. So it's protected, and no other leases can be given other than to Lummi Nation. So there's another little twist in the jurisdiction. And then we have the jurisdiction of the city and the county. Here is a map that shows the city boundary. This line goes along the shoreline and across, and it stops maybe around there. This line that goes further off to the north and the west is an urban growth area line, so the city anticipates that it will assume jurisdiction in this area in the future. There's one other boundary line that's a little bit more confusing, and you read about it, but I was not able to find a chart of it anywhere. And those are the inner and outer harbor lines of the city. And I don't have a chart, but the inner harbor line goes sort of right through a lot of the development, and then the outer harbor line is a little bit further out there. And those, as I say, have a lot of significance to the city and the county. DNR does not allow any building out past the outer harbor line, and currently the Port of Bellingham is in negotiations with the state to see if they can move the outer harbor line down in the Fairhaven region for a project that they would like to see down there. So there's that jurisdiction. It's a complicated mess, isn't it? That the federal government's involved, the Army Corps of Engineers shows up from time to time, the state government is involved, Lummi Nation has a stake, and then the city and county are all have a stake as well. And that's why when you read sometimes negotiations between those elements, it gets to be kind of challenging because each of them has their own interests. Okay, so that's our jurisdiction. What about impacts? What have we done to Bellingham Bay in the time that Europeans have been here? And I'll go back to this chart of Bellingham Bay and give a quick description. You'll hear more about it as the day goes on, but I'd like to say that our impact, the European impact, post-contact impact, has been considerable. Along the Lummi Reservation shoreline, the high tide area has been rip-wrapped. Project of the Army Corps of Engineers to reduce erosion of the marine drive along the way. So that habitat, although mostly intact, has been changed. If you look at the eastern side, starting from around Fairhaven into the city, has been modified by train tracks, and so that shoreline has been modified. This area up in the north part is still pretty much the way it was. It's a very dynamic area. It changes as the flow of the Nooksack River changes, but right now it's pretty much natural. This is an area now that you'll see. This is called, locally it's called Whirlwind Beach, which is when you finally have to deal with something, you give it a name, and I don't know who it was. Maybe Tim Wall was involved, but that's now called Whirlwind Beach. And it's interesting. I have a poster out there that shows how Whirlwind Beach accepts organic material from the rest of Bellingham Bay, and it's a huge composting pile, and oftentimes is misinterpreted as wood waste from old human activities. But take a look and you'll see. All right, and then there is, let's see, the downtown area. As I was reminded, that there is 750 acres of tidelands that are now uplands in that area. Probably the single largest land of change in Bellingham Bay, and also the site of all of the chemical contamination, sediment contamination as it occurred over the years, and I'll say a little bit more about that in a few minutes. So, the downtown area very much modified. Where did the mouth of Whatcom Creek, Noisy Creek, occur? Where is it? It's at the falls, isn't it? Way up here somewhere. Anyway, very much modified river system. Okay. So, there's one change that has occurred in Bellingham Bay that is major that I want to focus on for a moment. This is a close-up of the Delta area. Here's the Nooksack, Bellingham Bay side, the current Nooksack River going up into Ferndale, and here's the Lummi Bay side and some little water going up through Lummi River, or the Red River as it's called. And I'm mentioning this because it's a massive change from the way that it used to be. And I have here a chart that's going to take a second to figure out. This is courtesy of Tim Wall. He went back. These are the conditions 1855. So the time of the treaty that was signed, Europeans having virtually no effect on the river system. What I want you to notice is that by the width of the blue, you can get an estimation of where the water flowed. And you can see that the majority of water, nobody's quite sure, maybe 75, 80, 85, 90% of the water went into Lummi Bay. And only a small amount came down into Bellingham Bay. That's a huge change, isn't it? And this change started around 1860. The first Europeans in the area started to manipulate the log jams starting up around Ferndale, cleaning out a path into Bellingham Bay because that's where they wanted to have access to. And we've been living with that since. Near the turn of the 19th century, the Army Corps of Engineers came in and stabilized the diversion where the Red River goes into the Nooksack now, and for that time since, we've been dealing with most of the raw water coming into Bellingham Bay. For those of us that live in Bellingham, that's a good thing, because it's the river that drives the circulation in the bay that determines the residence time and consequently the water quality. It's very important to us to have that river flow. And I'll say at the end, and say it again now, that that's one of the things that is questionable in the future. There's already a proposal put out by the Army Corps of Engineers to, over time, share the flow between the Nooksack River and the Lummi River, to take half of it and put it back into Lummi Bay, which from an estuarine ecology point of view would be very good for it. From a water quality point of view, it raises some questions, because who wants contaminated, coliform contaminated water going into Lummi Bay? Anyway, that's jumping ahead, and that's looking ahead, and I'll say a little bit more about that later. Okay. Okay, so that's enough of the slides. I want to go back and talk about the impacts. Somebody said the cleanup around the waterfront area started in 1995. Actually, it was quite a bit earlier than that. I came on the scene in 1970, as Steve said, when Huxley College started, and got to see, I think, Bellingham Bay at probably its worst. We know that there was all kinds of resource extraction starting late 1800s, and whatever it was, whether it was coal mining or timber or pulp, whatever it was, Bellingham Bay, or the city, Bellingham Bay was used as the garbage dump, literally so and figuratively so. All the waste went untreated into the bay. Most of the development was right around the waterfront area of Whatcom Creek. That's the area that suffered the most. When I came here in 1970, the sulfite waste liquor from Georgia Pacific was not treated. And on the right days, you could see a ribbon of red running all along the shoreline. That ribbon of red, which was totally lethal to young salmon. And that was occurring. The pulp waste that was dumped out was just sitting in Whatcom Creek on an anaerobic sludge layer on the bottom, and mercury was being deposited by the mercury plant. Things were not so very good. It wasn't just that. Let's not blame Georgia Pacific. I took a class down to what is now Marine Park in South Bellingham, and to do a little low tiding because it was a good low tide day. And we were walking down the beach, and there was this pipe that was running across the beach out into the bay. And that pipe had a hole in it. It was broken, and there was about an 8-inch diameter hole. And we stood and looked at it, and it was the sewage, raw sewage from all of South Bellingham Bay flowing underneath our feet. And that's an image that I won't ever forget in my life. And to show that, the Bellingham was planning the sewage treatment plant at that time, and I called up somebody in the city and said, "This is happening." And they said, "Well, we're going to have it fixed pretty soon." I said, "Yeah, but there are kids down there, and they're looking at what's going down." Well, you can imagine. Anyway, that got fixed. So that's a general tenor of how things were. But things started to change around 1975. Georgia Pacific put in the big bathtub for treating the sulfite waste liquor, then put in the irrigation lagoon later on and to clean up. And then the sediment cleanup started. And what I would like to say in covering this is that it's been 40 years since the cleanup has started. It takes a long time. And just to remind people that are frustrated with the slow pace of change, why can't we get this done now? Remember that it's been 40 years that we've been cleaning up this mess. It took us 100 years to make it. So it's not at all unreasonable to think that we still have quite a long way to go before we'll get back to the water quality that we're content with. So there's a little snippet of what we've done in the Bay in the past and where we are at the present. What are the current issues that are of concern? Jack Lowes mentioned that there's too many coliform bacteria going down the Nooksack River, and that needs to be worked on. That's something the county can be active in, and it's just unconscionable to me that the Lummi Nation does not have access to an economic activity. They're being penalized economically, and I kind of wish that the county would say, okay, we'll give you an annual payment of whatever those shellfish are worth that you're not able to harvest, but that doesn't seem to be the case. But I hope that we're able to work quickly towards resolving that water quality issue. So that's a major one. What else now? Well, I'm getting out of time here. Let's look to the future. To me, the issues that are most important in the future are, one, clarifying the importance of Bellingham Bay to, or the Nooksack River to Bellingham Bay, and what would happen to us if, in fact, half of it was diverted away to Lummi Bay. And the other is, as we get the water quality and habitats of Bellingham Bay in better shape, it's time for us to start looking at how that ecosystem works. We know that salmon are important in all kinds of reasons. We have not a clue. Well, no, we shouldn't say we haven't got a clue. We just don't know how Bellingham Bay works as a nursery ground for juvenile salmon. There's some work that started, and it's really good, and it needs to be expanded to a much greater extent, and we'll hear more about that later. So, if you're looking ahead, let's keep the Nooksack River as much as possible, and let's find out more about what the function of the ecological system is, so in producing natural resources that can be part of the economic future of Whatcom County. Thank you.
You've been watching a presentation from the State of the Bay Symposium held in January 2015 in Bellingham, Washington. If you'd like to see the other 6 presentations from this symposium, please visit the City of Bellingham's YouTube site, www.youtube.com/cityofbehamwa.